Philosophy and philosophers can be kind of depressing. Even the most hopeful theories and ideas still get to their conclusions with a healthy dose of sobering reality and pessimism. And then there's pessimism itself, a branch of philosophy in which the conclusion is more or less, it is better to not be than to be. Nobody has taken this to its extreme more than Philip Mainlander, the philosopher who took his own life.
This video is brought to you by the Ridge Wallet. It's light, sleek, and industrial. It doesn't fold or awkwardly bulge in your back pocket, and it seriously changed my whole pocket situation. Most people are still using wallets designed in the 90s, carrying around old receipts, pictures of their ex, and gift cards in an unorganized mess. Not the Ridge Wallet, though. This wallet holds up to 12 cards, plus room for cash, and there's over 30 colors and styles, including carbon fiber and burnt titanium. The durable material means each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. You could buy this one wallet and carry it for life. If this wasn't enough to win you over yet, check out their 30,000 5-star reviews. The Ridge team is so confident that you'll like it that they'll let you test drive it for 45 days. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/Sisyphus. That's ridge.com/Sisyphus and use code Sisyphus. Link in description.
Born in Germany in 1841, and the product of his father forcing himself on his mother, Mainlander was the youngest of 6 siblings. His demanding father forced him to go to school in Dresden, where he would learn to become a merchant. Afterwards, at the age of 19, he worked at a trading house in Italy, learning Italian and acquainting himself with the works of Italian writers, such as Dante and Leopardi. Leopardi was especially influential in Mainlander's philosophy. Schopenhauer describes Leopardi's pessimism as such. He is entirely imbued and penetrated with it. Everywhere his theme is the mockery and wretchedness of this existence. The monotony of his day-to-day job led Mainlander to find an escape through reading poetry and philosophy, and so, aside from Leopardi, Mainlander also delved into the works of Schopenhauer, who gives us such cheery one-liners like human life must be some kind of mistake and lasting happiness is an illusion. The two most important Schopenhauerian ideas that Mainlander would carry into his own work would be Schopenhauer's assertion that nothingness is preferential to being and that the world is driven by the will, an aimless and irrational striving that causes all suffering. In 1863, Mainlander returned to Germany where he maintained yet another depressingly boring job working for his father. His mom would pass away on his birthday 2 years later. In 1869, he got a job at a banking house. He hoped to earn some bread through interest earnings and live a decent life. And then in 1873, the stock market crashed and this ruined his plan. He promptly resigned and spent the remaining 3 years of his life, aside from a short career in the military, writing the Philosophy of Redemption, a work that would articulate his entire system of philosophy. In 1876, he asked himself whether or not his life still contained any value for humanity. He concluded that he had completed all that he could, and at the age of 34, and shortly after the publication of the first volume of his work, he hung himself. One of the most unique and imaginative ideas that stems from Mainlander's philosophy is that of the death of God, a theory that predates Nietzsche's own statement in The Gay Science. Mainlander points out how strange it is that the world appears simultaneously unified and fragmented. Sometimes we feel at one with everything around us, and at other times we feel alone. Man is both a part of nature and notably distinct. Mainlander believes that the universe was at one point a singularity, a perfect unity, and has increasingly become fragmented since its conception. This unity he called God. God, being God, would know that non-existence is better than existence. It should be pointed out that, like most pessimists, Mainlander argues that annihilation is preferred, that nothingness and non-existence is just a heck of a lot better than existing. And so God would naturally come to the same conclusion. However, God also can't simply cease existing. It's against his nature. So God decided to carry out a process of self-fragmentation, taking his own life in the sense that he would continually divide himself, that being the universe, into further and further fragments until he no longer exists. Mainlander gives us this terrifying idea, that the world is simply the rotting corpse of God. Now, why would God seek bliss through annihilation? Mainlander quite liked Schopenhauer's idea of the will, the aforementioned craving everything has that appears to have no exact aim. Animals strive to survive, plants strive to grow. All of these strivings, if fulfilled, simply extend the period of striving. The will is in this sense the root of suffering. If we weren't constantly trying to find meaning or be happy, we probably wouldn't be in such a panic to begin with. Hence, Schopenhauer suggests that those who can silence the will, such as the artist at work or the saint while meditating, can live a life devoid of suffering. For Schopenhauer, the will is unified and singular. Silencing one's own will only partially silence the unified will. Mainlander disagrees, stating that the will is broken into multiple wills. There is no unified will, at least since God decided to break himself apart. So, as he argues, death is a better salvation than creation or asceticism, for it accelerates God's aim towards absolute and eternal nothingness. This is an important point that also departs from Schopenhauer. Whereas Schopenhauer viewed history as meaningless and striving towards nothing, Mainlander took the more Hegelian view that history is actually moving towards a goal, the goal being nothingness or the end of existence. Mainlander really liked nothingness, so it would make sense that his ethics revolve around the idea that all of our pursuits should be ended, since they lead to pain, and that we should welcome the will to death in order to find true happiness. He argues that one's individual will is united with the entire universe if they will death or nothingness. What does this look like in a less philosophical sense? Mainlander believed in psychological egoism, the idea that what is best for the individual is what makes one happiest. This sounds like basic self-interest and reflects Stirner's philosophy of egoism quite closely. However, Mainlander makes an important distinction. Whereas ignorant self-interest seeks to promote itself and further seeks to satisfy the will to live, enlightened self-interest reflects Mainlander's idea that happiness is achieved through a will to death, through the recognition of nothingness as the holder of happiness. Hence, they would be humble and live a life of asceticism. His main goal, interestingly enough, was to reduce human suffering. Yes, despite his adoration of death, Mainlander recognized that it would be best to make life as pleasant as possible for those who are still alive. Hence, his politics reflects a sort of progressivism that is rare in the works of other, more reactionary pessimists. Mainlander also appears distinct from other socialists of his time, believing that revolution was unnecessary, tied to the idea that socialism would be achieved through the parliamentary process. He was also fairly nationalist, straying from Marx's international aims, and finally, he held a favorable view to the state, believing that it was necessary in order to supply the basic needs to the population and maintain social order. Mainlander appears somewhat utopian here, amidst his incredibly pessimistic championing of nothingness above all else. Certainly, Mainlander held dark and troubling ideas. Viewing our lives as sections of God's rotting corpse isn't pleasant, and yes, his pessimism appeared to deeply impact his personal life, leading to him taking his own life before he ever found any recognition. Nonetheless, Philip Mainlander presents us with the idea that one can still maintain hope even after accepting the darkest of possible visions. As Frederick Beiser tells us of Mainlander, he had the deepest sympathy for the suffering of the common man, and much of his thinking was preoccupied with the poverty of the mass of people and the workers. In fact, his personality was generally described as gentle and warm-hearted, perhaps a token of his acceptance of the chaos and finality of the world that he had envisioned. Some would argue it makes sense as to why he decided to take his life. However, with a life spent coming to terms with annihilation, I'd argue that it is far more appropriate to see his final act as a tragic surrender to personal turmoil, rather than a product of his work. Despite his grim fate, Mainlander did in fact offer us a vision of a world that limits suffering for those still living, through humility, political cooperation, and the guarantee of basic needs to all. Mainlander consumed the darkness around him, and in return, offered us light.